There are many things I love about Romania, my chosen adopted home for almost 2 years now. The magnificent scenery, the wonderful food, the incredible people. The language, however, is most definitely not one of them. Now, Romanian is spoken by around 25 million people, mostly concentrated in southeastern Europe, in Romania and Moldova, with historical pockets of population also present in Ukraine, Serbia, and even Hungary. When people actually remember it exists, it's usually characterized as quite a linguistic odd duck regionally, as it's the only Eastern Romance language in existence. This makes it the often forgotten about fifth member of the major Latin languages tree, along with Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, and depending on whether or not you consider it a language, French.
Your uncle knows your tuna.
Romanians themselves are very proud of this fact, often referring to themselves as a Latin island in a Slavic sea. Alongside this, the American Foreign Services Institute, which is in charge of educating those going into CIA coups and destabilizing fledgling nations, classifies Romanian with all the other Latin languages as Category 1, the easiest possible language for English speakers to learn. Having set aside a decent chunk of study time daily for this language for well over a year, I'm here to tell the FSI that they are just full of shit. Romanian is not easy. I don't know which underpaid intern put this on the website, but either way, I hope he got fired or worse, ended up dating a Hello Kitty girl. It's been an entirely unwelcome surprise to find it so frustrating. Honestly, I'm convinced that unlike its Romance siblings, Romanian did not develop organically in the wild, and instead was engineered in the depths of the Dungeon of Fear and Hunger itself. Its difficulty comes down to its quite frankly utterly bizarre grammar, but before going into that, out of fairness, I'm first gonna list the positives of this unique language. The vocabulary is quite easy to acquire and retain, and in my opinion is very straightforward and literal language to construct in daily use. If you have a large vocabulary in English, you'll be able to find common Latin roots in a good amount of vocabulary. It's also easy to write and pronounce, as it's almost entirely phonetic, so spelling is simple, and when you hear it spoken, you know how to write it. It's also the most powerful Latin language, meaning that a Romanian speaker will learn the other Latin languages far faster than other Romance speakers will learn Romanian. But that's it. Here's where the positives end and where the Kafka nightmare of learning Romanian rears its ugly head. Full disclosure, I've been studying Romanian daily for well over a year now, and in doing so I've soared to the level of not quite A1 yet, and here's why. The first major grammatical hurdle you'll encounter are the genders. Like the majority of European languages, to the dismay of non-binary people, Romanian is a heavily gendered language. Although, annoyingly, in contrast to the other Romance languages, it's not always 100% clear what gender something is when you look at the word. Because why would it be? Also, unlike its Romance siblings, Romanian has the linguistic oddity of also including the neuter gender, which at first seemed like no big deal. But it actually is, and quite a big deal. Because, as it turns out, in Romanian, being neuter isn't its own gender. It means that a noun is masculine when singular, but feminine when plural. And it's super common, with a ton of nouns that do this. From a linguistics perspective, this is so freaking weird that the only other languages I could find with certainty that do this are some Bantu languages from Africa like Swahili. Why this unique feature is so annoying has to do with pluralizing, which itself is such a miserable experience. I'd rather have my nails plucked out than have to generate window in Romanian. Masculine nouns aren't so bad, they end with a u or consonant, but also sometimes an e, I or To increase their number, you just add an e and that's it. Feminine nouns are a completely different story. These nouns are identified by ending with an ie or ia, but also can end in e or I, just like masculine. Pluralizing feminine nouns means you'll replace the ending with an e or I, or uri, or I, or ale, or iele. Or maybe you don't need to change them at all. Or sometimes you change the word completely, or something else completely random, like here. This is where the neuter nouns will really kill you, because a really huge percentage of the nouns used in daily life are actually neuter. Because f you, that's why. Pluralizing in this language is completely without rhyme or reason, and instead the rules are seemingly chosen by lunatic dictators based on what random object has upset them that day. Rabbits, iepuri, trees, copaci, and dogs, câini, are allowed to stay masculine no matter what, while pula, keys, K, and cars, mașini, are forever female, but chairs, scaune, aquariums, aquari, and pens, pixuri, are punished by turning female when kept together in a group. And this irregularity isn't a bug, it's a feature of the language. Tons of daily vocabulary are neuter. And because it's a strictly gender language, getting the gender right is a major component of saying a basic sentence without sounding brain damaged. And if you ask Romanians why their language does this, they'll just pause and then say, "Oh well, it just sounds better this way." No, it doesn't. It's ridiculous that your language is based on vibes rather than actual rules, and Romanians shouldn't be constantly arguing with each other on how to correctly pluralize something. Unlike Romanian, Hungarian is strictly logical, and just based on this alone, Transylvania should be given straight back to Hungary. Incorrectly pluralizing further comes to bite you in the ass with articles. Thanks to its Latin lineage, the articles are tacked onto the end of the word. So if you don't know the gender, you can't use the correct article, which adds another level of frustration when you're sitting there for 30 seconds trying to think of how to say Romani au obținut firele de cupru de la vecinii mei. The Romanians obtained the copper wires from my neighbors. Roman to Romani is able to stay masculine, but copper wires is neutral, meaning the singular masculine fir, wire, must be given the feminine plural of fire, and neighbor or vecin is allowed to stay masculine as vecini. Like, why couldn't you just had an article in front like every normal Latin language under the sun? Again, even Hungarian knows to have its articles in front of the word, and everyone bitches about it being unnecessarily complicated. But wait, it gets worse. It seems like every language has their own linguistic quirks when conjugating their verbs, and Romanian is no different. It depends on the verb ending, but in general the first person singular, eu, aka I, will end in a consonant or u. Second person singular, tu, aka you, will end in an e. He or she, aka el or ea, will end in either an e or a. We or noi will end with an the plural you, voi, ends with some sort of eats, and then apparently the Romanian grammar police drank too much Mona that they lost interest in creating their language logically, because they, meaning ye or ele, will be either exactly the same word as I or he, she, because again, f you, have fun conjugating. I've been told that supposedly there is logic to these verb conjugations, and this is a statement that I can agree with. At times. Occasionally. But then again, who the hell has time to read all these tables? I got bills and rent to pay, what do you take me as? A political science student? Hell no. But before you start to get too comfortable, s joins the chat. Squished between two linking verbs, s functions like the English to. For example, I don't want to learn Romanian would be nu vreau să învăț românește. At first glance, this looks pretty simple, but somehow, like the Japanese deciding a single orange needs 5 different layers of plastic packaging, so did the Romanians decide to add infinite layers to the onion of frustration of what should be a simple concept. Because when you want to say he, she, or they do something, the rules for verb conjugations are completely chucked out of the window. You have here the simple sentence, Secuil nu vorbește românește. The secular doesn't speak Romanian. Now, let's say you need to be more specific and say the secular refuses to speak Romanian. You'd think it'd be something along the lines of Secuil refuză să vorbește românește. You insolent babbling buffoon! You simpleton! Developmentally delayed 2-year-old Romanian children pity your forever smooth brain, and may Zamoxis have mercy on your soul. God knows why, but when it's a he, she, or they needing 2 linked verbs, you have to change the second verb to a completely different form. Instead, obviously, the verb a vorbi in the previous sentence must be changed, and it should read Secuil refuză să vorbească românește. And there are tons of different ways to do this. For example, if you update Cocalari fură un radio or the Cocolars steal a radio to the Cocolars want to steal a radio, the verb has to change and instead it becomes Cocalari vor să fure un radio. See, românul pleacă din România, or the Romanian leaves Romania, versus romanul vrea să plece din România cât mai repede, meaning the Romanian wants to leave Romania as soon as possible. It may not sound so bad, but just look at all the pointless changes you have to remember. And when you ask the Romanians why, God, why? It just sounds better this way, ubu? So far, what I've spoken about is annoying, but still pretty manageable in the bigger picture. But now we have reached the cases, a truly wonderful living relic of Latin. The Romanian language considers itself the closest living language to Latin, due to directly inheriting its notoriously nightmare-inducing grammar. This is most glaringly evident through the retention of the Latin case system, which the other Romance languages were smart enough to throw away faster than a Protestant his religion when his dog dies. Romanians, however, are very proud to carry on this lineage, much in the way an antisocial pet owner is proud to inherit their father's rabid child-hating pit bull, or a future school shooter is proud to inherit their father's gun collection. In theory, noun cases, also known as noun declinations, aren't that difficult a concept, and are actually very common in European languages. The idea behind cases is that the noun will change its form depending on how it's being used in the sentence. Like, for example, depending on if the noun Transylvania is giving or receiving, benefiting from the action, or possession needs to be conveyed. The noun Transylvania will have to change its form. Simple. Romanian has 5 cases. Accusative is when the noun is the object of the verb. For example, in the sentence, Ungurii nu mi vor vinde mici, meaning the Hungarians won't sell me the mici is in the accusative case. Now, were we to say Românii au furat Transilvania, or the Romanians stole Transylvania, Românii, aka Romanians, are in the nominative case, as they are the subject of the sentence doing an action. In this language, the accusative and nominative case are expressed in the same manner, with basically just needing the definite article tacked on, which, if you're someone who isn't familiar with the concept of cases, say an English speaker, is extremely confusing. Romanian's vocative case is so simple it hardly counts as a case, as it's just used when addressing someone directly. For example, when my fiancée yells at me, porcule, when I eat all her special chocolate fudge brownie ice cream, porc, meaning pig, just has ule tacked on to transform it into you pig. Porcule. But the accusative, nominative, and vocative cases aren't why we are here, and were Romanian cases limited to these, we'd all be sleeping so much better at night. However, there are 2 other that need singling out. I'm talking about my current sleep paralysis demon, the genitive and dative cases. Romanian's genitive and dative cases are the stuff of eldritch nightmares. In theory, they shouldn't be so bad. Nouns are modified to the genitive case to show possession, essentially the same as of or apostrophe s in English. And the dative case marks who/what is receiving an action, basically how to works in English, aka who is receiving the action. But for God knows whatever reason, Romanians decided to give them the exact same form. You might be shrugging, thinking it doesn't sound like such a big deal. Or if you're American, you're probably raising your hand to ask to have the concept of a case explained for the 500th time. But listen to me, there is no curse in English, Serbian, Hungarian, Guatemalan, Finnish, or Tongan to express how frustrating learning Romanian dative and genitive case makes it to construct a simple, even toddler-level sentence. I mean, imagine if you were learning English and the concept of to and of were expressed with the same exact morphological forms, and how quickly this would become unbearably annoying. In practice, this can mean that to correctly say what should be straightforward sentences with simple concepts can take literally months of intensive studying. Getting to the actual declinations themselves, you may be tempted to let your guard down, as the masculine rules are actually pretty simple. For example, let's take the words nekaz, sorrow, and magyar, Hungarian, to speak about the Hungarian man's sorrow. We look at from the perspective that the Hungarian man owns his sorrow. It is possessive, therefore genitive rules apply. We simply add the definitive article onto nekaz to make it nekazul, or the sorrow, and add the article to magyar to make magyarul, or the Hungarian, and then add ului to show possession and transform it into nekazul magyarului, or literally the sorrow of the Hungarian. To make it plural and talk about the Hungarian people's collective sorrow at the fact their sons have no bread, we just change the ending ului to the masculine plural ending of ilor to get nekazul magyarilor, the sorrow of the Hungarians. As the noun Romanians or Români is also masculine, if we want to say the sorrow of the Hungarians is pleasing to the Romanians, we are now utilizing the dative case for the noun Romanians. So the same rule applies and it becomes Romanilor le place necazul maghiarilor, as Români becomes Romanilor because something is being done to them. As ridiculous as this looks, just like pluralizing and gendering, the dative and genitive rules for masculine nouns are, at least for this language, bizarrely straightforward and simple. But then we learn the dative and genitive rules for the feminine nouns. Now, I'm far too classy and cultured to go for a cheap shot here, but when learning Romanian, I must point out that you'll quickly notice how simple and regular the rules are with any masculine noun, and how nightmarish and difficult the infinite feminine exceptions to the rules are. Make a joke here yourselves. Anyways, for dative and genitive cases, where the nouns and adjectives involved are feminine, they do something so stupid. I'm going to lose 100 IQ points trying to explain that, yes, such a ridiculous concept is a common feature of this cursed language. For God knows whatever reason, when you speak about a feminine noun as either the recipient of an action, dative, or as a possessive, genitive, everything singular becomes plural, which also affects all the other modifiers in the sentence. So if you want to yell at Vasile for spilling Mona on your book, my book's cover is covered in spirit Mona, you have the root words of cartea mea, or my book, coperta, the cover, and este acoperita cu Mona, is covered in spirit Mona. It has to become coperta cărții mele, este acoperita cu Mona, because the singular book now has to become plural, going from cartea to cărți, and so do its modifiers. So you better have never skipped Romanian feminine noun day at the gym, because any two nouns in a row have to be turned genitive, and if you don't know, you'd better be resigned to sounding like a developmentally delayed 3-year-old until quite literally hitting upper B1 level. Or you better have patient friends willing to sit there quietly for 5 minutes while you go through 300 different possible feminine noun endings in your head, only for your first 10 guesses to be wrong anyways. Where the genitive and dative cases really add an extra layer of frustration is when expressing what should be the very simple concept of this and that, aka the demonstratives. For this, the singular masculine and feminine are acest and aceasta. Plural, they're acest and aceste. But don't forget, it all depends on how demonstratives function in the sentence. If you're trying to say to this or of this, all possible options double. Or instead, you can choose one of these 8 additional ways to express this. However, the common folk often instead use one of these other 8 forms, or perhaps one of these 8 instead. With that, it's a similar story, depending on whether or not you want to have your noun be singular or plural, or before or after your demonstrative, plus taking into account its case function in the sentence. You have 16 base choices. But if you don't want to use the more literal or correct terminology, instead want the common people speech, you'll instead use one of these other 8 choices, or perhaps one of these 8 additional options instead. And God have mercy on your soul if you need to convey the term the other one, or use the word the same. Basically, depending on how it's used in the sentence, there are as many ways to express this or that in Romanian as there are stars in the known universe. And seeing as they look and sound basically identical to my unwashed Vinuturi infect ears, if I'm unfortunate enough to have to use one of these forms in everyday speech, I just start with a strong sound and pretend to cough while looking away and continue my sentence as if nothing happened. All while the Romanians themselves are begging me to just switch to English already so we can stop speaking such a cursed language. All in all, if you want to experience patrolling the dungeons of fear and hunger in real life, where the completely arbitrary rules were designed by the forgotten gods who couldn't care less about you, whether you succeed or fail is left up to the cruel flip of a coin, whether you make it out alive is completely out of your own power, and the dark cosmic forces couldn't care less about assisting your meaningless quest, Romanian may be the language for you. I give the language a 10 out of 10, I couldn't recommend more wholeheartedly. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like and smash the subscribe button, and if you really did, become a member like these wonderful people. My name is Janusz, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.